You know, feeling seen and heard is one of the deepest needs we have. I mean, we want to know that our lives, our hurts, our stresses, our anxiety, right? We want to know that they're being seen by the people that we love and that love us. And the experience of being seen means our emotions are being acknowledged. It means our thoughts are being considered. And our experiences are being validated in ways where we feel and experience empathy, compassion, validation. It's like when we're feeling anger, being seen means someone comes up to us and says, you know, it just must feel very chaotic for you right now. And I want to understand that. Or when we're sad, somebody comes up and acknowledges, you know, listen, I just know you're super down right now. And I really want to understand the reasons why, or I understand the reasons why. You see, I think that Christian spirituality is really about seeing, and seeing with that figurative third eye, you know, that is awakened and evolves. It's a more evolving eye. Now, some Christian people think that Christian spirituality is not about what you see. It's about what we say Christianity is. It's what a certain subculture says that faith is supposed to be for everyone who names it. You know, it's their doctrinal beliefs, it's their ancient creeds, it's their dogmatic view or biblical interpretation of theology that matters, and we're the ones that deem whether it's real. Well, do you know what that perspective of seeing does to our spiritual eyesight? It creates sort of a spiritual macular degeneration. You only end up seeing certain people, and then you end up being blind to others. That kind of spirituality might not see gay or queer people. That kind of spirituality sees women in very limiting ways. That kind of spirituality may see scientific advancement or theological development as some sort of threat. That theological development, that can weaponize the Bible by dictating who God sees and who God doesn't see based on their biblical interpretation. And you know, if you're not quite buying what I'm saying, then I would just ask you to look at church history. But just don't think it's certain religious views that limit our spiritual eyesight. It's not just religion. When our spiritual eyesight is only nurtured by a cultural, social, economic, racial vantage point, and we assume that's the only way, we miss seeing. And, you know, when I think of my own white experience, which is well-educated, well-resourced, well-privileged, and then I don't get outside my vantage point with empathy and compassion, and I don't try to see through the lenses of others who don't share my white experience, I may not end up really seeing or understanding the issues of my black and brown and indigenous neighbor. I may not end up seeing systemic racism. I may remain blind and never address the black experience or the marginalized experience or any people of color. You know, I may not see the deeply rooted racism and injustice that's historic. And so I may not see poor people, and I may not see how they lack the opportunities that I was given. I may not see the Muslim or the Jew. You know, folks, when it comes to Jesus Christ, he saw the people around him with gentleness and empathy. he announced to people, listen, I see you. I see your situation. I know you can't take it anymore. I know it's been too much for you. And I recognize that, of course. And I'm there for you. And people just felt seen by him. So may we see with the empathetic and understanding eyes of God, that we don't just observe, but that lead us to action.
My suffering doesn't mean my Father's forgotten me. My wandering isn't threatening. My Father sits here with me. My Father sits here with me. And what if broken just means I'm open? And what if this is what it looks like to receive? Though my journey has been filled with sorrow, what if this is where you wanna meet with me? And what if this is where you show me how to be free? More faithful than my closest friend, you've always been here with me. Love without end, love that defends. You'll always be here with me. I know you'll always be here with me. And what if broken just means I'm open? And what if this is what it looks like to see? Though my journey has been filled with sorrow, what if this is where you wanna meet with me? And what if this is where you show me how to be free? Yeah. Free. I know I won't stay broken, and I won't stay empty. I won't stay broken. I won't stay empty for long, 'cause you fill me up, God. I won't stay broken, no. I won't stay empty for long, this is what it looks like to receive. Even though my journey has been filled with sorrow, I know this is where you want to meet with me. And I know this is where you show me. I know this is where you show me. I know this is where you show me I can be free. Free.
Hello, I'm Brett Beyer. I'm a SPERO DEI board member and very excited to give you a financial update. So we're actually going to start, though, back in 2020 and give you an idea of what that was like. So we were coming through at the end of 2020 realizing that the pandemic was never getting better. And so what we had to do was actually seek some counsel to get an idea of what other charities and churches were doing. In particular, they said, do not raise your budget. You actually have to cut it, and it has to be flat and for the foreseeable future until we know that COVID's starting to end. We did that, the hard work. It wasn't easy. We met as a board, and we went through, we turned over every stone. We looked under every rock. We went very deep, and in particular, staff took some major cuts. And you know what a great staff we have here. It wasn't easy, but they were willing to help out. When we lost some staff, we didn't replace them. We also got rid of any extra equipment or anything else we could think of. So that was a key part of being ready for 2021. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Tammy for her update.
Hi, I'm Tammy. I'm going to give you some of the actual numbers in the financial picture. For the first 10 months of 2021, the donations were around $450,000 total. And you guys, that's amazing that you generously gave that much. Also, our expenditures, however, even though we kept them very flat and reduced, were around $590,000 total. So that leaves us with a shortage right now of $140,000. And our weekly expenditures are around $13,500 every week. And so that puts us on target for a shortage at the end of the year of around $165,000. So the good news is that we have had cash on hand since the beginning of the year, and we've been able to make up some of that shortage along the way and just keep ourselves going. But we have only $29,000 left in our cash on hand at the end of October. Another piece of good news is that we've got a debt-free building and property here worth $6.2 million. And we also have the ability to use a line of credit that we've obtained, but we really are going to try not to do that. We don't want to create more debt for ourselves at all. And SPERO DEI is such a special place, and we feel like we're going to be protective and we're going to work together. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Tammy. You know, it has been a crazy world that we've all had to live through the last couple of years, and it's definitely been a crazy world for our church. I mean, we're a brand new church, and we're starting a church, and then we dealt with COVID. But just like any family, our church family, we're going to work through this, and we're going to come out on the other side of it and be better. So that being said, from a church family, we have established 2 goals as a board. And the first goal deals with the 2021 deficit of about $165,000. This year, when we do the annual gift on Christmas Eve, we're going to use those gifts to help offset that deficit. So the first goal that we have for our family is for all of us to really think about what we can do in order to make a gift and help us with that deficit for 2021. And then our second goal for 2022 is an ambitious one, but we're a unique place, and we are going to be able to do this. Our second goal for 2022 is we want, as a church, to be back in the black by the end of the first quarter. And there's three things that we can do in order for us to not run at a deficit. And the first is for those givers that are currently giving. If you are giving, but you have not set up your recurring giving online, we really encourage and challenge all of you to consider doing that. That's what I started doing, and boy, it really makes it helpful from a budgeting standpoint on a monthly basis. The second thing is for the givers too. If you are giving, but you feel like that you can give more, man, that would be great. We really need everyone's help right now. And so we challenge and ask you to consider that. And then finally, for those that are new at the church, but if this place is special to you and you haven't started giving yet, we encourage you to consider starting to give. This place is amazing. We are a beacon of light, and we're only going to be a larger beacon of light, but we need everyone's help right now. We are going to get through this. There's no question in my mind at all, and there's no question in the mind of the entire board, but we need your help, and we are so grateful to be able to serve you.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, I have determined that my Christian spirituality needs something crucial. Now, you might be different, and you certainly don't have to apply my experience to yours. But one essential that has ironically impacted my faith in life-giving ways is disillusionment. Yeah, that's right. I just said that disillusionment has been essential to my faith. It has. Now, what is disillusionment? It's when you've lost faith or trust in something that you used to regard as valuable and meaningful in your life. It's a feeling or it's an experience of disappointment that arises from the realization that something is not what it used to be or even believed to be. And this can bring an accompaniment of existential angst, because when your beliefs are changing and shifting, being challenged, it's hard. You know, when you think about it, People who are disillusioned have lost their illusion, meaning there is this feeling that maybe I was just believing an illusion the whole time. That's why being spiritually disillusioned, that's why it can be so scary, so frustrating, so confusing. When you're disillusioned in faith, there can be this ironic experience at first, right? At first, you feel wiser about something. You feel more awakened to something. You love experience what's true to you. However, in the confusion of it all, in the newness of it all, you also feel like you're losing something, because disillusion brings disorder for sure. But I believe there's a reordering that can await you and me. And if we try to see the good in disillusion, what it ends up being is it actually frees us from maybe a rigid faith or a rigid illusion that is no longer working. So disillusionment is the beginning of being freed from that. So, Jesus walked his own followers through such disillusionment. Their embrace of him and his teaching certainly meant that something new and different was being introduced to them, but it also meant a shift away from everything spiritually they had known. So let me show you a passage here from the Gospel of Mark that perhaps might awaken us to this whole idea that disillusionment is good for faith. We need disillusionment. So in this scene, Jesus has been teaching in and around the temple. He's just taught the chapter before that love is the cornerstone and the marker of all of Christianity, and that's what Christianity means about love. I'm sure as they were listening to him when he was teaching that, there were many head nods of affirming it and belief. I mean, what sane person doesn't think love is a good part of belief? Because what then happens a moment later in chapter 13, as they're in front of this huge, beautiful temple, those same head nodders who loved his teaching on love, suddenly they're not even seeing with loving eyes this poor woman who has shown up with little alms, the only gifts she has in order to worship. Folks, belief is one thing, actually loving is another. So Jesus decides to make a shift and skedaddle from the temple. And then in Mark 13, we see this. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, look at these beautiful stones and wonderful buildings." Jesus replied, "Do you see these huge buildings? They will certainly be torn down. Not one stone will be left in place." Later, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives across from the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew came to him in private. They asked, "When will these things happen? What will be the sign that they are about to take place?" Jesus answered, "Watch out, and don't let anyone fool you. Many will come and claim to be the Messiah. They will use my name and fool lots of people. When you hear about wars and threats of wars, don't be afraid. These things will have to happen first. But that isn't the end of everything. Nations and kingdoms will go to war against each other. There will be earthquakes in different places, and there will be times when there is no food for people to eat. These things are like the first pains of childbirth. So in this scene, one of his disciples is just dazzled by the architectural majesty surrounding them. You know, according to first century historian Josephus, the Jerusalem temple was an awe-inspiring wonder. It was newly constructed by Herod the Great, and the temple's retaining walls were composed of stones that were 40 feet long. The temple itself occupied a platform that was twice as large as the Roman Forum. It was 4 times as large as the Athenian Acropolis. And Herod reportedly used so much gold to cover the outside of the walls that it is said that anyone who gazed at those walls in the bright sunlight, it would just hurt their eyes. So this disciple is so impressed, so much so that he shares that sense of awe with Jesus. But Jesus isn't so impressed, and he responds with a question, "Do you see these great buildings?" Which is a funny question when the disciple just sort of asked the same thing, because aren't the two of them seeing the same thing? Well, the answer is no, they're not seeing the same thing. They're not seeing the same thing at all. I love what scholar Debbie Thomas points out here, so I give all credit to her. What this disciple sees is an architectural marvel for sure. But for him, it's also the biggest, the boldest, the most unshakable symbol of God's presence that he is capable of grasping, even imagining. For him, those massive stones, they hold religious memory, they hold religious meaning. To him, they bolster his colonized Hebrew experience and give him identity. They offer a potent symbol of God's glory and worthiness. And as he looks at the preeminence of the temple, and what then takes his breath away is the temple represents, it just gives him religious certainty, religious permanence, religious exceptionalism. And the temple just displays all of that to the world. That's what this disciple sees. But that's not what Jesus sees. Jesus sees ruins. He knows it will be leveled to the ground. And in fact, 50 years after this conversation, the Romans leveled the temple to the ground in 70 AD. So Jesus is saying it will be torn down. Everything that Herod constructed, it will be deconstructed. Jesus sees the fragility, he sees the loss, he doesn't see the permanence, he sees change and evolvement, not stasis, and he says no stone will be left upon another. It's all going to be torn down. Now, the biblical literalists of our day, they like to project this passage as some sort of supernatural foretelling of a literal future that the writer didn't know about yet. Meaning, this conversation happens around 30 AD-ish, and the destruction of the temple happens around 70 AD. So, wow, what is this? The future untold? Well, most credible scholars date Mark's gospel to be written sometime after the destruction of the temple. So this writer, when he was writing this, he actually knew the temple was already destroyed at this point. So the biblical literalists also like to describe Jesus' words here as apocalyptic. Now let me ask you something. When you think of the word apocalyptic, what do you think of? Do you think of interplanetary warfare? Do you think of the 4 horsemen? Do you think of zombies infiltrating suburban shopping malls? Do you think of wholesale nuclear destruction? For me, an apocalypse would be as if there was no pasta in the world. And folks, when I am at my most cynical state about American Christianity, I think of those evangelical writers who made an absolute killing by fleecing an American church-going audience with all that Left Behind fiction series as they kind of tell about the book of Revelation. I think about the televangelists who incite fear with their cottage industry of prophecy. But you know what? One of the things Debbie Thomas lets us know is the word apocalypse means something actually quite different than we've come to think it means. An apocalypse, more than an awful ending, it actually means an unveiling, or what activist Adrienne Marie Brown calls it, an apocalypse means uncovering. It's a disclosure of something hidden, of something yet unseen. To experience a real apocalypse means you actually gain fresh sight. You have fresh disclosure. You actually apprehend reality like you've never apprehended it before. So I guess in a way Jesus is offering his disciples a kind of apocalyptic vision, but not the biblical Marvel comic version of the book of Revelation. But he's offering them an unveiling, an uncovering, and he invites them to look beyond the grandeur of the temple and recognize that God will not be domesticated. He won't be domesticated by a building or even our human-made image of what God is. And this building is not going to be the epicenter of God's salvific work. It's not bound by mortar or stone. Jesus also won't be domesticated by ancient creeds or confessions or biblicistic literalism. God always exceeds every edifice, every institution, every mission and theological statement, and every symbol human beings create in his name. He will not be domesticated. You know, in her sermon collection, God in Pain, Barbara Brown Taylor argues that disillusionment is essential to the Christian life. In fact, she says, disillusionment is literally the loss of an illusion about ourselves, about our world, about God. And while it is almost always a painful thing, it is never a bad thing to lose the lies we have mistaken for the truth. That is so good. You know, back in 2016, before the whole George Floyd summer of 2020, American author and social activist Adrienne Marie Brown, she wrote the following in reference to racial injustice and the whole Black Lives Matter movement when people were thinking, oh man, are things getting worse? This is what she wrote. Things are not getting worse. They are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. And so when it comes to racial inequality, the kind we saw in the summer of 2020, Christian spirituality must pay attention to it. It has to see it and activate in it. But there is also a tearing down going on with the American Jesus. If I could distill what is happening in American and Western Christianity just to a few words, as Debbie Thomas agrees, and I would concede Brown's thoughts here, things are getting uncovered. So let's hold each other and pull back the veil. So for the remainder of my sermon, let me continue to give credit to Debbie Thomas's thoughts. And she poses powerful questions here to all of us. And as we might jump into the shoes of this disciple listening as Jesus wants to see things anew here, here are some great questions to ask our own heart. What illusions have I mistaken for what is true? In what memories, traditions, or comfort zones do I attempt to house and domesticate God? On what shiny religious subculture edifice have I pinned my hopes, my beliefs, instead of actually putting attached trust in Christ? Is it my denomination, my church, my spiritual heritage. For me, my heritage was evangelicalism. Why do I cling to permanence and certainty when Jesus invites me to evolve? Am I willing to sit with the reality that things fall apart? The things I love, the things I've built, the things I cried and prayed and strive for, am I willing? Can I embrace a journey of faith that includes rubble, ruin, and deconstruction? Well, these are some poignant questions, aren't they? 13th century mystic Meister Eckhart said this. He said it about 900 years ago. And I think it's never more true than it is today. This is what he said. He said, "Let us pray to God that we may be free of God." Implying what? That our conceptions of God, our conceptions of theology and interpretation, they're always going to fall short. They may always fail, and they may always domesticate God. And let's have the courage to be honest, as Eckhart suggests, that the imposter gods and the rigid doctrines that we construct because of our need for certainty, permanence, exceptionalism, and because we fear the mystery God, they're more about us. Let's admit that we shape the gods in our own image. We use reformational doctrinal tests to figure it out because they serve us as much as we serve them. But what they can also do is they can put God in a box so he behaves theologically how you want him to. But I think we need to join Christ in the ruin of it all, in the deconstruction of it all. Let's endure the unveiling because it will be a truth that sets us free. Let's dare to see what Christ sees, see things as being uncovered. Let's hold on to each other tight, yes, but then have the courage to pull that veil back. What's also good news is Jesus does guide his disciples on what to do and how to live when the walls of faith and life are falling down. And for you, maybe it is just that. It's your faith that is unveiling. Maybe it's certain relationships, friendships, love relationships, partnerships, marriages. Maybe they need an unveiling. I'm not advocating abandoning them, but being willing to uncover them and deal with any disillusions you have, tear down any illusions in it. And Jesus models, we go about that through calm strength, generous love, courage, always in the face of uncovering meaningful matters. Another thing that Christ encourages us is to show courage during our fear. That when our illusions are challenged, that we would show courage in that when they are shaken, but that we're not to give into the terror of it all. We're not to, not capitalize on the chaos of it all. Listen, if Christ taught anything, God often is not where people, even the preachers, say he is. The God I experience doesn't fearmonger, doesn't incite suspicion. The God I believe in doesn't thrive when put in a rigid box that never changes or evolves. It just domesticates God. And as Debbie Thomas, the scholar, encourages us, let's just avoid hasty, knee-jerk judgments and conclusions. Let's be perceptive with our eyes, not pious. Let's be imaginative, not immature. Let's make peace. Let's choose hope. Let's cultivate patience. and incarnate love as the world shifts, reels, and changes, as faith does as well. And in this divisive world that we're living in these days, it is easy to despair. It's easy to maybe pull back and grow numb. It's easy to let the exhaustion win. But it's precisely now when Christianity feels like there is a major unveiling point happening, that we can respond with resilience, healing, and evolving love. It's precisely now when there is this systemic evil, systemic racism or marginalization, or if it's just age-old brokenness, when it threatens to bring us to ruin, that we hold on to each other tight and we allow the veil to part and the walls to come down. Folks, something is actually shifting and happening. Disillusionment is not what's wrong with it, but it's what's actually aiding it and evolving it to a better place. It may be struggling to be born, for sure. Yes, birth pangs are real and can hurt. We know that at SPERO DEI, but God is like a midwife. And when God gives birth, it's never to desolation. And when we bear witness to the ruins through our disillusionment, rest assured, these birth pangs are ultimately going to bring the joy of newness, and it's ultimately going to set us free. So let's pray. God, may we not domesticate you. And may we hold on to the reality that disillusionment in life, in faith, in love, in ambition, in dreams, when disillusionment comes into our life, though it can be scary and of course discouraging, it can be and often is the opportunity for change, to evolve, to actually see things as they are. So if any of us are holding on to a certain illusion that is not working anymore, whether it's in our faith, whether it's in our relationships, whether it's in our worldview, whether it's in how we see people who are different from us, different color skin, different sexual orientation, different religion. Gosh, may we have the courage to love as you love. May we have the courage to tear down a faith if it domesticates you, keeps us in a safe zone, and keeps a world and people out who we feel threaten us. May we not have that kind of faith. What's actually true sets us free. True is not a particular subculture's version of faith. Truth, as the scriptures teach, the Greek word aletheia, means what is actually true. May we have the courage to unveil and uncover what is actually going on, even if it shakes our illusions, because it will always set us free. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, that's our service for today. I'm India Lacerda, the elementary director here at SPERO DEI, and I hope that was meaningful for you. If this church continues to be a place that is meaningful and offers you space and a sense of community, you can continue to be informed on the things that we're doing by either following our social media or going online and subscribing to our newsletter. To those of you who have been contributing and giving during this time for the day-to-day operations of making this church run, I want to say thank you. You are a huge part of why this community is growing and expanding. And if any of you are interested in beginning to contribute, maybe for the first time, you can go on our website. There's an easy tab on the right-hand side that says Give Here, which is safe and secure, and you can easily give there. Thank you so much. I hope we'll be able to see you next week.